Chapter 8. After the audience, Joseph walked on air. Other people worshipped the busts of the Empress as those of a lofty, almost divine figure who had had her powerful enemy, the Emperor's mother, done to death with a smile, and had brought the Senate and the people of Rome to their knees. But he himself had spoken to this woman, the greatest in all the world, as he would have spoken to any ordinary woman of his acquaintance. Gildi, Yaniki, he had merely had to gaze in her eyes for a little to make her promise to release these three men, an achievement that the High Council in Jerusalem, with all their wisdom and political cunning, had not been able to bring off. With a light step he wandered about the Jewish quarter on the right bank of the Tiber. People gazed after him with awe. Behind him he could hear them whispering, "That's Dr. Joseph ben Matthias from Jerusalem, priest of the first rank, the Empress's favorite." Irene worshipped him as if he were a god. The time was past when he had to sit among the less highly honored guests on the Sabbath eve. Now Caius Bartzeron felt honored when Joseph reclined beside him on his banqueting couch. More than that, the sly old fellow became less taciturn and divulged to Joseph difficulties that he solicitously concealed from everybody else. His great furniture factory was still as prosperous as ever, but now a danger which he had foreseen for years was becoming more and more imminent. The fashion was growing among the Romans of employing little sculptured animals as ornaments. These figures were carved on the legs of chairs or as bas-reliefs. They were used in 100 ways. But it was written in the Scriptures, "Thou shalt not make any graven image," and to the Jews it was forbidden to fashion effigies of living creatures. So Caius Bartzeron had until now refrained from producing these household animals. But his competitors were exploiting this refusal of his more and more unscrupulously. They declared that his products were obsolete. It was painful for him to reflect how many of his customers were leaving him. His policy, now after the Great Fire, meant a great loss to Caius Bartzeron. He had looked round him for expedients, for some way out. He had tried to get out of the difficulty by the argument that he himself did not use the things he produced, but merely sold them to others. He had obtained the opinions of a whole row of theologians. Well-known doctors in Jerusalem, Alexandria, and Babylon had declared the production of the ornaments in question to be in his case a venial sin, or even actually permissible. Nevertheless, Caius Bartzeron hesitated. He did not mention these decisions to anybody. He knew quite well that if, armed with them, he ignored the scruples of the Orthodox, it would seriously endanger his position in the Agrippian ward. His old father Aaron might even die of grief over such godless liberalism. So this man, outwardly so self-assured, was full of doubt and anxiety. Joseph did not adhere strictly to the performance of all the Orthodox rites, but "thou shalt not make any graven image" was more than a commandment. It was one of the first tenets of Jewish religion. The word and the image mutually excluded each other. Joseph was a literary man to his very marrow. He put his faith in the invisible word. It was the most miraculous thing in all the world. Though without form, it had more power than anything endowed with form. No one could possess God's word in very truth, the sacred invisible word, who sullied it with sensual images, or did not reject with all his heart all outward vain show. He listened to Caius Bartzeron's explanations with a stony and impassive face, but his very impassivity inspired Caius Bartzeron to renewed efforts. Indeed, Joseph had the impression that the old man would not be displeased to have him as a son-in-law. Meanwhile, the information had gradually trickled through that a certain condition was attached to the setting free of the three men. When the Jews heard of that condition, their joy was suddenly turned to sorrow. What? Demetrius Libanus was to play the Jew Apella in the Pompeian Theater, too, before 40,000 people? The Jew Apella! The Jews had a shiver down their spines when they heard that spiteful nickname, into which Rome had concentrated all of its antipathy to the immigrants on the right bank of the Tiber. The Jew Apella. The word of scorn had played an evil role in the pogroms during the reigns of Tiberius and Claudius. It signified looting and butchery. Might not the Romans' hate, now happily asleep, awaken again at any moment? Was it not both stupid and blasphemous to stir that sleeping fury? There were bad enough examples to show what the Roman theater public were capable of on occasion. It would be a piece of monstrous foolhardiness for Demetrius Libanus to conjure up the figure of the Jew Apella on the stage. The stricter among the Jewish doctors inveighed anew, and with increased bitterness, against the actor. Was it not a sin even to act on the stage, to slip into the shape and the apparel of another human being? Had not God, praised be his name, given to every man his own face and his own shape? Was it not rebellion to wish to exchange them for those of another human being? But to act the part of a Jew, to act the part of an heir of the seed of Abraham, one of the chosen people, for the amusement of the uncircumcised, that surely was mortal sin, blasphemous presumption, and must bring calamity on everybody's head. And they demanded that Demetrius Libanus should be excommunicated. The more liberal among the doctors defended the actor with warmth. What he planned on doing was for the redemption of three innocent men. It was the sole means of saving them. And was not the commandment to help the prisoners one of the chief commandments in the Scriptures? Could one say to the actor, "Do not do it, let the three die in prison, as thousands of their forefathers had died in the brickworks of Egypt"? The dispute was a violent one. In the theological seminaries, biblical quotations were keenly bandied. The interesting problem was put before scholars in all the Jewish high schools, and it was debated in Jerusalem, in Alexandria, among the great doctors in Babylon, and in the most remote Orient. It was a question providentially created for theologians and lawyers to practice their wits upon. The actor himself went about as usual, and showed plainly for anyone to see the tragic conflict between his religious and his artistic conscience. In his heart, he had long ago decided to play the Jew Apella, no matter what it cost him. He knew, too, exactly how he would do it. Already, his librettists, among them the subtle-minded Marullus, had composed an effective framework for him with fertile situations, and the strangely mechanical and resigned rocking which he had noted in the three men in their cell had given him many a grotesque and gruesome inspiration. The figure he wanted to present was a daring mixture of the tragic and the comic. In the popular taverns, in the business quarter, and also in the barracks, he acted single scenes to test their effect. But then he would sink into dejection at the thought that probably he would not be able to give the play after all, his conscience might forbid him. With gratification he became aware that gradually all Rome was beginning to ask whether Demetrius Libanus would really play the Jew Apella or not. Wherever his litter appeared he was greeted with acclamations. The people applauded him and shouted, "Hail, Demetrius Libanus, play the Jew Apella to us." He spoke to the empress about the matter, and complained what a wretchedly risky business he had let himself in for, and how heavy his scruples were. The empress laughed and gazed smilingly at the irresolute actor. Instructions had gone out to the brickworks in Tiber that the 3 Jewish forced laborers were to be well treated, so that they might not die in the interval. Moreover, Poppaea was waiting for a decision from the Ministry of Appeal. The setting free of the 3 men was not a great affair. Nevertheless, the oriental policy of Rome was very complicated, and Poppaea was enough of a Roman to be prepared to let the amnesty drop at once if there was the slightest political objection to it. She would smilingly cancel her promise if it should be necessary. In the meantime, however, it amused her to encourage the actor in his original intention. She told him that already the aristocratic opposition in the Senate was working against the amnesty, so he would have to decide at once. It was cruel to protract the sufferings of the poor fellows unnecessarily. She smiled. "When are you going to play the Jew Apella, Demetrius?"